When the sun shines high, Christmas lights are unneeded. In the darkness of winter, Christmas lights and Christmas joy are bright and loud and beautiful. And needed. It has always been this way. As easy as it may be to imagine the first Christmas through a sparkly and sentimental lens, with some Unitarian ministress plinking trite melodies on the piano's most annoying keys, to imagine a beloved young bride holding a fat-cheeked son as her gentle husband gazes on in adoration, the truth is nothing like a tidy stable set in a northern European snow globe. It is nothing like any nativity scene ever sold. The truth involves more struggle, more darkness, more oppression, more grief. The truth is a scandalous young woman sweating and groaning and straining while her older, angel-scolded husband plays clumsy midwife with hard, calloused, unclean, and splintered hands. The truth is a cave stable smelling of afterbirth and blood and manure. The truth is an exhausted virgin mother surviving her ordeal only to have her crude sanctuary invaded by coarse men from the fields, come to rouse her. Strangers smelling of sheep barging into her makeshift birthing room on the invitation of angels to gape at her blood, the gore of her battle, her baby. The truth is genocide, the slaughter of innocents, Egyptian exile, wandering wizards, and somehow, against all odds, joy, the joy that would change everything. As you hang your lights in these dark days, as you decorate your tree and wrap undeserved gifts for those you love, remember that what you do is rebellion. Rebellion against the darkness, against joyless despair, against the slaughter of innocents, the oppression of tyrants, and the folly of bureaucrats. That is what Christmas is, and what it always has been. Joy shines brightest in darkness, and the darkness is shattered. Joy always wins. In these darkening times, may your joy be an eruption. May your Christmas cheer burn unquenchably bright. May you be raucous and bold and overflowing in your giving, never sour in your embrace of abstract truths. For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulder, and his name shall be called. Merry Christmas from New St. Andrews College. This season, erupt.
Welcome to the Stories Are Soul Food podcast, presented by Cannonball Books, the kids' fiction imprint of Cannon Press.
Met a ghost of a king on the road when I first fell. Fire burning to my knees I fell. Met a ghost of a king on the road.
We're here.
You've just heard. Do you want to set up what they just heard? You've just heard. You've
just heard me and my 2 a.m. voice wishing you a Merry Christmas on behalf of New St. Andrews College.
Yep.
And adding the tag "This season erupt" at the end because it just needed a little more of a call to action.
It's good.
And you're in the ad.
Yeah. Well, do you want to hear?
Featured.
I got criticized for having my family for having a hipster trad aesthetic. Like a trad hipster, traditional hipster aesthetic. And I thought,
let me just comment, because you do.
Yeah. I thought guilty as charged.
But not really. I mean, like, you have a Northwest aesthetic.
Right. They accused everyone of acting like they're in Gap commercials. What they didn't know is these were all real events with 0 actors.
Yep. That's fun.
Very funny.
We actually are just that picturesque.
Yeah.
I mean, you guys didn't know out there that Gap bases multiple of its campaigns on our aesthetic here in the inland Northwest.
Just outside of Helmer, Idaho, where everyone cuts their Christmas trees, Gap shows up once yearly.
Once yearly to say, hey, does anyone have a minivan for this shot? Yeah. No, we're not going to use a Land Rover. Let's use a Honda. Was it a Honda?
Yep. Odyssey.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
Right.
It is really funny when people do that. I have heard something similar about the whatever it was. Come and Welcome. Is that or Come and See?
Yeah, Come and See.
Come and See. Doc. Sorry for getting that wrong. My niece's hard work on that doc, where people are just like, I just so want this to be true, but I'm sure this is false. There's way too many happy children. I'm like, yeah, no, it is. It's a lot of hard work to have a well-tended community farm,
Yeah.
like a people farm. It's a lot of work. But it is real. It's like when people see like a tamed wilderness, like they're faking this. The wilderness cannot be tamed.
Yeah.
It's like, oh yeah, it can be.
Yeah.
So that ad I like a lot.
Me too. It was
So
great.
that NSA Christmas ad it's one of those things that I occasionally do where I work on marketing, not just for NSA, but for any clients. I've done it for clients kind of all around everywhere. And a lot of times it's consulting or a little bit of scripting or script doctoring. I've done some crisis management, where some of the statements that you might see out in the world from public figures may have had a writer involved. So I have like some narrative positioning, marketing hands in lots of different areas of the Western world.
Yeah.
And one of those things is dropping the occasional ad for New St. Andrews.
Yeah.
So this one, they wanted a Christmas greeting, and that's what they got.
Yeah. It's
So
very merry.
yeah, it is
very merry and bright.
It's good. It's good. It makes me happy because Christmas is fantastic. It's the best. It's the best ever. And all you who don't give gifts, this is the year to break the chains off your horrible souls.
Yeah.
And
Retail's
do that.
down everywhere, so the sales are going to be crazy. It's a good time to jump in.
Yeah, jump in and give.
Yeah.
Okay, is that what we're talking about today? Is
Yeah,
Advent,
actually Advent.
Christmas? Yeah.
There was a
What number is this, by the way? SAS.
I haven't checked.
We're still in the 90s.
We're in the
We're
90s.
not at episode 100
We'll make
yet.
sure we highlight 99 and 100.
Okay, so we don't
I think
need
we're
the
at 96
timpani, the timpani and the cymbals yet.
Yeah. Do you have any Christmas listen that you do? What music do you hit at Christmas time?
I let my kids curate now.
Oh, nice.
My son's in New York, and my wife and I are hoping, if I'm able to with work, my wife is going out there for sure, and I am going to try to bounce out, and we're going to go to the Messiah with him in Manhattan.
Oh, wow.
Before flying, before he comes back home for Christmas. And so the Messiah is like peak. Like for me, it's way up there. And then right after that is Amy Grant's Tennessee Christmas. So
he's not a snob.
yeah, it's like
This is hipster trad,
those,
right?
yeah, those two.
Yeah.
And as a side note, hipster trad. It's so funny that trad can be applied.
Yeah.
To hipster now.
Yep.
I remember when the New York Times magazine tried to take people have been trying to take hits at my dad forever, but when they took a shot at my dad in print, and it was actually, the overall article was not bad, but early on they described him as looking more like a lumberjack than a pastor.
Even when he wears a suit.
Yeah,
That's the
even when he
line.
wears a suit. And it's like, correct. This is the Pacific Northwest. We do live in the wilds. I have seen timber wolves in my driveway. I saw that one when I was in town, like downtown. I lived, basically a block from downtown, and there was a wolf right in my street where my
And all the people
parking
out there
was.
saying it was probably a coyote. Guys, we live in
Yeah.
Idaho. It's not a coyote.
I know the difference between an animal that looks like you could kill it by kicking it, and an animal that starts stalking me because it knows it can take me and it's not wrong.
Yeah.
It's like, where the humped shoulder is way up there. It's a really high shoulder, and
Lots of power.
it's got a head like a small horse. It's like it's massive paws.
Yeah, I
Long,
remember
long
sliding
legs.
with all my friends, sledding down a hill, and at the bottom, a coyote had been stuck in a fence, and the farmer came out and shot it while we were all sledding.
Yeah.
And that's coyotes.
That's where, yeah, exactly. Stuck in the fence, shoot it.
Yeah.
I was on an ATV with my daughter last fall, and we were bombing around our farm fields, and near the magic light. Like, it's just so much fun to get up on those elevations and enjoy like massive panoramic, light and views. And we kind of have our back to the mountain, and they're looking out over the Palouse prairies. That's fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
But we came over a hilltop, and down in the draw below us, kind of tucked away, one hill over from our house, there were all these deer, like just so many deer and big bucks. And, it was I was like, wow, like right here. And one very large black wolf stalking them. Wow. It's like, this is a quarter mile from my living room.
Yeah.
And, it was huge and it's just creeping. It was downwind and creeping in on all these deer. And as we like rose over the hill, everybody hears the ATV, right? And all the deer turn and they all turn and see. And then they, it's like they start to go, the wolf takes off and I just opened the throttle and she and I just chased this wolf like through. Awesome. I opened the throttle up completely. So I was at max speed. I was at around 40 going downhill. Like I was going 40 miles an hour going downhill coming on this big black wolf. And it was just dusting us.
Wow.
Like it just, it was just gone. Like I hung with it for a while. I hung with it in sight. Mm-hmm. It's like, but it was pulling away with ease. Mm-hmm. It's like, it was just, so by the time we lost sight of it, like we went from being a couple hundred yards from it when we came onto it, it's like when we startled it, to like I had a downhill angle, it had this uphill angle out of the draw, and I was racing down this slope as it was racing kind of up and out. And by the time we both exited, and I was hoping to like get a real good look at this thing, it was just, it was half a mile away from us. Like it was just like barely at a head start. I'm the one with the internal combustion engine and a downhill slope. And we were cooking. And I was actually thinking like, I'm going a little fast for having my daughter, with me right now. And I maxed out at that moment because it was through rough terrain at around 45 going straight down. And it was just gone.
Wow. Speedy.
So that's one of them. Then I also saw 3 of them cross my driveway right in front of me, large. And then back when we lived in town, so I guess I had 4 wolves. Back when I lived in town, one was waiting by my truck when I came out in the morning, right around 6 a.m. And it was just there in the quiet. And when it saw me, it lowered into a crouch and just started coming towards me. And I yelled at it and whooped, and it was not worried. It was not concerned. It just kind of slowly stood up because it realized it didn't have the jump on me, and then just loped casually down the street. And I went in and called the cops, and this is Idaho, and said, hey, there's a timber wolf, on Jefferson Street. And they said animal control doesn't show up for work till after lunch. So
if it's still there,
do what you have to.
If it's still there, give us a call.
Yeah. So that is hipster trad.
Mm-hmm.
So what hipsters are knocking off, like the flannel shirts and like the boots, the beards, the men, the men not shaving. This is a Wrangler shirt, by the way. Like they're knocking off something. Like they're looking for that, milking their own chickens vibe. But we have people who really do milk their own chickens,
and it's delicious.
Chicken milk is like nothing you've ever tasted, literally.
Okay.
Anyway, all that to say, the hipster trad thing is authentic.
Yeah,
there are the headwaters, lumberjack headwaters of the Northwest, where we all kind of live in the blast radius of that aesthetic. We just do, and so it gets imitated.
Yeah,
lots of places.
That's funny. Well, we're heading into Advent, and a nice Merry Christmas greeting. But recently, some guy, Lyman Stone, on Twitter. I don't know who he is, but
are we supposed to?
I don't know.
I don't know.
No, I don't think so. He's a Lutheran who stirred up some controversy by talking about Noah. And so I thought this would be a perfect time to talk about how you condense characters, as many people are working through their Advent Jesse trees. How do you talk about characters? So what he said is the 2014 film Noah, wasn't too bad because number one, it treated the flood like a horror story.
Right.
And number two, it made Noah seem like kind of a bad person, which he probably was, in order to be the kind of person who, could lock his neighbors outside and listen to them scratching on the outside of the ark and get out of the ark 300 days later.
Those are thick walls. I don't think we would have heard them scratching.
There you go. Yeah.
So
I thought, half of that sounded like what you would say, that, the ark, massive destruction, lots of bodies. if they weren't covered by mud when you got out of the ark.
Let me just I had a recent conversation with my kids, and in this conversation we were talking about contemporary believers who are friends. I work with them. They know them. My son knows them, and in school, like people, just general believers. And one of the things that general believers do, the believers from Generica, the United States of Generica, they love to dismiss things as the Old Testament, or that was a different culture, that was a different time.
Yeah.
And like just backhand it and say, we like the virtues of right now are binding on the past. Like holiness now looks exactly like holiness then. So we can go back and say, man, they were very unholy. What do we get to say about Noah?
Yeah.
Like, what can we say about Noah? What we can say is we can talk about his incredible faith over an extended period of time.
Yep.
And we can talk about, he shamed himself with drunkenness. Right?
And
that's,
yeah.
Okay. Yeah. This is a guy who got drunk. He got drunk and shamed himself.
And this guy was saying,
Let me add,
that he's trying to hide.
He'd been through a lot.
Yeah, exactly.
He had things to forget. He might have had trouble sleeping at night. Like we actually don't know the context of like what he doesn't have your little sleep aid you can go grab from the grocery store. He doesn't have like a pharmacy. He doesn't have doctors to go talk about his food intolerances. He doesn't have any of that. He can't. Like, there's no infrastructure of self-pity and self-identity or anything else. So none of us can even begin to get on a high horse about Noah. It's like right there.
Yeah.
This is one of those things where in my house, the prescriptions we have for a wide variety of things, muscle relaxants and migraine
from
medication,
ibuprofen to Tums, all
very,
the way
very,
on up.
very expensive migraine medication, all sorts of other things.
Yeah.
They had at that time, especially post flood, without any of the pharmakeia out of the potion mixing of the previously the obliterated society.
Yeah,
they had fermentation. That was it. So for us to look back and say, I don't know about this. That's pretty terrible that he got drunk. It's like, you know what? He shouldn't have. He shamed himself. His shame was real. And yet, like even that is the only thing we're given with Noah. The only thing we see with Noah that he did wrong was he shamed himself there.
Yeah.
And that's it. So to say he was a bad dude.
2 Peter calls him a preacher of righteousness, and then he's got a big old section in Hebrews 11.
Did he or did he not save civilization?
Yeah.
Yes. He's one of the few people that you can say in history has by himself saved the world. Yep. Like the world. Every animal you see like every bird, every animal you see is here because Noah saved all the animals. Noah saved all the people. Noah saved the world.
Yeah.
And
the way Hebrews talks about it too is not just that he was slavishly following this direct command from God, but Hebrews talks about it as God gave him a warning of what was coming, and Noah had faith to save his household and move forward. A very active, productive.
So if we go through and we find those people you really like, those different heroes that you're like, yeah, man, he was great. Or boy, Esther's fantastic. Oh yeah. She seduced a married man and slept with him. You cool with that? Like would any modern pastor have the nerve to say on a blog that actually Esther was probably not a good chick?
Yeah.
She's actually probably pretty terrible.
Because she
was a slut.
She had to make the king want her in order to become.
And then she then had to let the king have her.
Right.
So she was a slut.
I mean,
right. It's like, so everybody would be like, oh, don't slut shame any woman ever. Like, let alone, somebody so perfect as Esther. Now, I happen to really admire Esther, and she's one of the great heroes. She saved her people. Yeah. She sacrificed herself to save her people. That is honored by God, and God used it. Noah saved all people, like all people.
Yeah.
Noah had the faith to do it. So anybody who wants to throw shade, I mean, like, go look in the mirror, dude. Like, what have you ever done?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what have you ever done?
So the move of saying Noah was probably very, I mean, you can imagine some serious psychological stuff he had to work through.
I can imagine that he was human.
Yeah.
Like, I know he was human and he was fallen.
Yeah.
And I know he was a complete hard ass who was wildly stubborn in his faith, working in one direction over time.
For longer than any of us will be alive.
Yes. For like working in one farcical direction.
Yep.
Like for longer than we'll live. He did that.
Big boat, middle of
and
nowhere.
Because he did that, we have existed.
Yeah.
As, have all living things. So whether or not he had there's times when this is kind of like saying, I bet those first Marines probably had some toxic masculinity back in World War II. I'm like, oh, you think? Like they were men for the moment. They were the right men for the moment. And even their vices were the right vices for that moment.
Yeah.
The first Congressional Medal of Honor winner who was in Guadalcanal, they found him. He'd been told not to retreat. They found him in the morning. He'd burned off all the skin with his own machine gun barrel, burned off all the skin of his forearms because the guy who was supposed to be helping him with the gun had died, and he had just continued to barehand it the whole time. Then he'd gone all the way down to small arms fire. Then he got down to his bayonet, and they found him with 3,000 dead Japanese, like in front of his position. So you take a guy like that, and you say, did he have any problems? It's like, yeah, I'm guessing. I'm guessing that dude had some, he might not have been a great listener at the kitchen table. It's possible that afterwards he drank a little too much.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, this is like, of course. What on earth is the point of bringing those little quibbles when he is like put himself on the altar to that extent? Like, don't try to diminish like the work and the glory of what he's done by the fact that he had consequences afterwards, or that he was uniquely equipped to do it with his personality. So somebody would be like, well, maybe he was autistic. Just like, you're not leaving. This is it. He's just not going to. So, okay, still a great man. Yeah. Like, it just doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's really, really, it's really terrible. So postulate with me that Esther liked it.
Liked being queen.
That she liked seducing the king. Let's say she liked the attention.
Yeah.
So, like that's rejoice in the Lord always. And that, like, Esther was sacrificing herself in a very unique context to save her people and God's people, and she did. She succeeded. Noah was sacrificing his entire life to save the world. And there's a very short list of people who just straight up saved the world.
I mean, I think we also assume that them saving the world, it's like the hindsight is so 2020 on this, that we think, oh, well, Esther was going to save the world, so it's too bad she had to do it this way. But she was that close to getting hung on a giant scaffold by her enemies.
No, the stakes there were incredible.
Yeah.
And Christians are not willing to see the real story. They're not willing to get in there. They try to keep her pure. They want to like preserve her purity, and it's this weird beauty contest. It was a much larger sacrifice than that. Like her level of sacrifice, her level of risk, and her level of sacrifice were way bigger than that. And so when people do this,
I mean, that's right in the text too, because they all became concubines after that one night. So I mean, it's you're not making stuff up or reading into the story here. That's text.
It.
It's text.
Like this is it. So Ruth is similar. Like Boaz definitely thought that he slept with her. Whether or not he did sleep with her, we don't know. Like, it's,
you mean after she uncovered his feet?
Yeah, quote unquote.
Yeah.
And he wakes up with a chick. He got drunk like Noah.
Yeah.
And then he did the right thing, believing himself to have been immoral. It's like, okay, so she kind of tricked him. Now, what we like to do is just project all sorts of morality, like all sorts of morality into that moment. Like, we like to baptize it, sanctify it, make it glisten. and Boaz was a noble man. He was a noble man. He was a great man.
Well, at the
Ruth was a faithful woman. She was extremely faithful. But
I mean, at the very least, she used that sexual impropriety as a lever to help
correct.
drive.
So imagine a noble man now.
Yeah.
A good guy in the church, believe, like he wakes up in bed next to a woman.
Yeah.
Like that's what he's processing.
Yeah.
Like he wakes up, with a woman under his arm.
Right.
And he's in a state of undress. It's like, okay, like this is what's happened. He then does all the noble things after that. And Ruth is the one who put him into that vulnerable position. A noble guy.
Yeah. She got in bed.
Yeah. She did that. Now, I don't think there's any reason in the text to think that they slept together. Like, I don't think we can say that like we can say with Esther.
Mm-hmm.
But he sure thought so. He's like, this is sexually improper.
Right.
It was, at the very least, it was very improper for him to have defiled her. So
yeah, he said, don't let it be known that a woman came to the threshing floor. That's straight out of Ruth too. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So in that context, we see her acting in a certain way and we think, man, what kind of woman is that?
Yeah.
It's like a fantastic woman. One of the mothers of the Messiah. Like, she's fantastic. Like that's all we need to do is like honor her, see it honestly, but don't like whitewash yourself and think that you get to sit in the judgment seat over these Old Testament saints.
Yeah.
Christ does, and you do not. Like,
yeah,
it's not, we get to read the stories and we get to try to learn from them, but
I keep coming back to Hebrews 11 and there's no judgment. There's only, they received their commendation for what they did. I think that's the language the ESV
Jephthah,
uses.
anyone?
Yeah.
Jephthah bothers a lot of people.
For sacrificing his daughter.
Yep.
Just that little thing.
But what list does he end up in?
Is he in, which one is he? Is he in,
he's
in the Hebrews 11 too?
He's honored. He's honored in the New Testament.
Yeah. I mean, Gideon set up.
Side note, I don't think he actually sacrificed his daughter in the way that we think.
Right.
I think she became a nun functionally.
Yeah.
Lost her virginity, but not her life.
Right.
We're sorry. Rephrase. Never lost her virginity.
Because she mourned her virginity.
Yeah, she mourned her virginity.
Yeah.
And I think she was given into holy service.
Right. Okay, but that reminds me, the second thing this guy was saying, so he wants to tell the story truly, understand what it would be like to have the whole world die, but then wants to judge Noah.
Right.
And say the point is that Noah's not a good guy. Christ is the only good guy. That's the move they want to do.
Yeah, as long as you're saying he's a fallen human, obviously. Sure, he sinned a lot of times.
But where I really couldn't get on board.
He worked on that boat for a long time. Do you know how many bad words he said? Anybody who's been involved in construction.
Hammer, thumb.
Yeah. How many naughty expletives came out of Noah's mouth? How many times was he frustrated, angry? How many times did he think about giving up? All of these temptations. Yeah, he's a human. And yet he still ran the race to the finish and saved the world. So despite all the flaws, despite all the temptations, he still achieved through faith and like faith believed and faith worked out. He achieved the goal in the end. And we cannot like say, oh, but by the way, he wasn't Jesus. Like we know that.
Yeah.
He was saved by Jesus. He was faithful.
Yeah.
He was faithful in service of Yahweh. Like this faithfulness. Was real.
Well, this reminds me because the next follow-up, he's reading Advent stories to his children, the same guy, and the Bible, he said,
Are we picking on this guy unkindly? Like, I've not read anything. Let's just add a caveat and say, I don't know this guy.
The everyman.
Yeah, okay.
Also, if you tweet to hundreds of thousands of followers, I feel like that's fair.
He's got hundreds of thousands of followers?
Tens of thousands? I think a lot. I can check.
Okay. Then I don't feel bad.
Right. But then following up, a children's Bible that then starts out the story of Jacob by saying, Jacob is not a very good person. Right. And that seems to be the takeaway for these Christmas stories is, we don't want you to deceive like Jacob.
Don't imitate the heroes.
Because you're reading to you're reading to your 4-year-old and Jacob lies.
The next time somebody tries to take all your stuff, like the next time somebody tries to rob you, and also bring massive guilt upon himself. By all means, lie to him. How's that? That's what you tell your children.
That's great.
Prevent that from happening.
Because he got it from his brother. His brother had traded it to him.
Yeah,
right?
but also more than that, his father was told. His father was told the older shall serve the younger, and his father was fighting that. His father loved Bigfoot, Esau. His father loved his Sasquatch son. He did not like his normally skinned son.
Yeah.
The smooth man. And
red
incidentally,
fur too,
and,
right?
yeah, and just
Red
let me just say that people think, oh, he was like slimy, he's greasy, the smooth man. It's like, okay, the contrast is his brother, where a goat skin was a successful, was a successful imitation of Esau. Like that was a hairy man. And
I mean, he got the name right when he came out. If I'm remembering correctly, it's because he's red furred as a baby.
And so you have Jacob. But so Esau was this, passionate, crazy hunter, very strong. Their father loved them both, and their father's supposed to give the blessing to Jacob. The older is supposed to serve the younger. This has been commanded. This is there. And so that flip when Isaac is saying, never mind, I'm going to disobey the Lord. I'm going to give I'm going to give the birthright to Esau. I'm going to give the blessing to Esau. And Jacob successfully prevents that derailment, that disobedience. So his father attempts disobedience.
Yeah.
And Jacob prevents that.
Yeah. Oh man. That reminds me, because then in
so
Hebrews 11,
why on earth pick on that guy? Like we can get on Isaac's case.
Yeah.
You can get on Isaac's case for disobeying God, but why get on Jacob for preventing his father from successfully disobeying God, keeping his father only attempting disobedience?
And then in Hebrews 11, it says, by faith, Isaac invoked future blessings on Jacob and Esau. So the fact is, Jacob actually got his dad into the Hebrews 11 list for properly blessing.
For successfully blessing.
By tricking him.
Yep. And so we have these stories, and it's like, well, Jacob was a little bit shady.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know what? Yeah. And he did what he had to do. And it was significantly less than what Esther had to do.
Yeah.
It
does seem like
significantly less than what Tamar had to do.
Do you think there's a change in Jacob, though, at the Bethel moment when he makes that oath? It does seem like there's some growth as he goes as a character
absolutely.
as well.
There's character growth. I mean, sanctification is real.
Yeah.
So
he starts to.
Yeah, he grows.
Yeah. His first promise to God at the
but if you look
ladder
at,
is
but you
quite
look at his
different.
handling, but you also look at his handling of his sons.
Yeah.
And it's not great. It's like, I think that he grows, but he's still very much the same man, even in old age.
The sibling rivalry to him is just a way of life.
Yeah.
Which is a pretty significant level.
Yeah. So the thing is, you think about Jacob and you think about what he went through with his brother. And then you think about his inability to prevent that in his own sons. Like that right there is like, oh, that hurts.
Mm-hmm.
Like where you have sons who are ready to murder. Some sons are ready to murder one of their brothers. Others are chickens. And like, you know what? Let's sell them into slavery and tell our dad he was killed. Like you have raised that brood. Yeah. Like that's the brood. And you did it as one who understood more than almost anyone else how brutal
that kind of sibling,
how brutal paternal favoritism was, and also sibling rivalries.
Yeah.
So he had, I think Jacob, now this is, I look at this and I say, I will defend Jacob where everybody likes to pick on him. I think he's the hero of the story there.
Yeah.
But later on, where his flaws work their way out is the sins of the father are visited to him. Like he sins in the same way that Isaac was sinning. Now he does, it's not exact because he is favoring the correct sons. Like, it's kind of it's weird.
Well, I wonder if the prophecy there, actually, he leaned in to that prophecy of the bowing sheaves, the sun, moon, and stars and the bowing sheaves. I wonder if he allowed that to drive some of his parenting choices. No, he's
sure, but I mean, okay. So here's the thing. And this we can get into some mistranslation of scripture. The coat of many colors was not a thing.
Okay.
There's no Technicolor dream coat.
I've heard it's coat of palms as technical in Hebrew, but I don't know what that means.
So I've been in talking to, my brother-in-law who studied Hebrew at Oxford, his Oxford professor, what I was told is coat of long sleeves. And whatever, that would be the best thing. And that is basically the coat of long sleeves is a symbol of authority. And so like the issue there is I think that Jacob is trying, he's doing the thing Isaac wouldn't do, which he is just going to the younger brother. Like, here's a younger brother and I'm going to give him the sign of authority. I'm giving this to him in public. I'm doing all these things. But he does it with a sort of ignorance of what's going to happen. Like outworking of that. So while he has this insider knowledge on paternal favoritism and sibling rivalries, he tries to avoid what his father did by just bestowing that authority publicly and in the way he believes he's supposed to, right?
Yeah, and he did make fun of it at first. I think it remembers his dad. At the beginning, he was like,
but he gives the coat of long sleeves to Joseph, or the Technicolor dream coat, or the coat of palms. But I think the thing that mattered about it was not that he got a special present, but that the coat symbolized rule and authority. So he's wearing a sign of the heir. He's wearing, this sign of authority, and the older brothers are ticked off about that
and really buck under.
So he believes himself to be missing, like dodging what his dad did. But in his attempted dodge, he fuels massive sibling rivalry with that paternal favoritism. So because of the way he navigated it. Now, did he place the coat on the right person? He did, unlike Isaac. Like, he did do that, but he did not successfully father his older sons through that. And I think that right there, that move is what people assume they see in the story of David with Jesse, and is not the case. But we tend to just read the stories in light of each other, and we just find one pattern and we try to like imitate the pattern. So here's a younger brother who has older brothers who are mad at him. It's like, oh, we've seen that before. So we assume it's Jesse loves him more and he favors him and all this kind of stuff. And it's just a different story, but the same story of brothers and the younger, and like God's telling a similar story about the younger, same story as Jacob, same story as Joseph, same story
and
as
Joseph's kids, Ephraim and Manasseh.
And same story as David. He's telling the same story, but the
details aren't
the details and the patterns, the exact patterns, the plot patterns are not the same. The motivations of characters are not the same.
Yeah.
So anyway, Jacob was a good dude. Yeah. But if you want to actually like identify where he messed up and learn from it, like look there. Don't look back at when he's getting what was rightly his, and what God had commanded his father to do.
Or his stuff with Laban. People seem to be very upset with how he treated Laban when clearly Laban's the bad guy. Yeah.
No, we have these horrible predispositions to like, once we peg a character as a character we don't like.
Yeah.
Like we try to read every narrative, with him being the unlikable character, like through all of his adventures. And it's just not.
And we feel bad for Leah. I think we,
I do.
That sympathetic character,
I feel bad for Leah.
Yeah. And
I think we should.
Yeah.
But at the same time, she was down, apparently.
Yeah.
She was down for the trick. And it is kind of funny that the trickster got tricked.
Yeah. That's when I got one of the great lines in all of the, I think, what was it? There in the morning. It was Leah.
Behold. Ta-da. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, okay.
Speaking of drinking too much.
Yeah, exactly. Speaking of self-medication.
Right.
So
patriarchal theme.
Anyway.
Yeah. So as when you're reading these Advent stories, how did you guys do Jesse Tree at all?
No.
You just
did the Bible. Yeah, we talked through a lot of stories, a lot of storytelling. But yeah, we never had the Jesse Tree thing. I'm not opposed to it. It's just we talked a lot and in depth about a lot of these different characters.
Yeah. I find it's helpful to get you talking about it regularly, because the repeated questions, they come up, and then you remember, hey, this kid actually hasn't heard this story before, and then you're working your way through it. So
yep, you cover it again. The other thing is you're covering it with your kids. Like I could think, oh yeah, we've talked about this, but when we did, my upper teenagers, my 18 and 19-year-old they were 12 and 13.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, and I'm like, oh yeah, we've talked about this, but their little brother and so on, like they were younger, but even their 13, 14, 12, 13 minds have now matured quite a bit. And so you need to kind of lay it back down and continue to cover it. And obviously they need to be reading the Bible on their own, but have trained their lenses, trained their sympathies to break in great ways. And I actually, to call back to finish my thought earlier that I got distracted from, when you're talking to contemporary believers who want to say Ephesians was written into a different culture, like that's a different culture, different time. Old Testament was different. It was a different time.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, no, I don't have to listen to that. I don't have to listen to that. I don't have to listen to that. And that's their mechanism. That's not for me because I don't live then.
Well, the one I heard is that when the Bible calls Noah righteous, it's righteous for his time.
Yeah, exactly. Relative righteousness.
Yeah.
And that's the assumption that our virtue now, that's back to our virtue now is more pristine. And that's just false. So would God rather you have never gotten drunk ever, but not have the faith of Noah? Like that faith of Noah? Or would it be better for you ever? You've never had the faith of Noah ever at any point in your life. Or would it be better? Is Noah actually a better character than you in that he had a much deeper, more profound faith? And yeah, he shamed himself with wine after the flood.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, I couldn't possibly say that I'm a superior character.
Right.
That I couldn't even begin. And no, I've never been drunk. So I've never been drunk in my life. And Noah had. But you know what else I hadn't done?
Save the world.
I hadn't lived.
With the boat you built out of your
I hadn't lived in one direction, like so with absolute profound faithful stubbornness, like the stubbornness that originates in a sure confidence in the will of God. I have not ever matched him there.
Yeah.
Like, so that like to even consider myself vaguely his equal, I think I'm not even in the same conversation with a guy like that. And I can say over here, I can tick a box and say, but he got drunk.
Yeah.
It's like,
that's a silly way to
it's like,
evaluate.
Okay, he did. And he probably said some rude things. Then it's like, I've said fewer rude things, and it's because I didn't live as long.
600 years.
It's, but anyway, I think one of the things that you can do to help yourself and understand that for any of you listening who have any dislike of any of the Old Testament characters or ever have any kind of impulse to push things into the past, I can just say, that's not for me. Give yourself a time machine. If you want to know where your real affections are, just imagine yourself getting a time machine and go back to Ephesus and tell them all to submit to their husbands.
Yeah.
Because it is for them. Like that was for them, right? So go into that culture and command all those women to submit to their husbands the way Paul does.
Yeah.
Can you do that? Like, do those words, like, do you choke you when they come out?
That's a good test.
Can you go back into the time of Moses and say amen when they're stoning someone? Can you stand there in the wilderness and help collect rocks when an adulteress is being stoned?
Yeah.
When a homosexual is being stoned?
I mean,
like back then, it's one of those things where Christians are so quick to say, I don't believe that now. And no, I don't believe.
I know.
Like,
and thank goodness.
Also thank goodness, it's like we live in a different time. We do live in a different time, and Christ has come and there has been a sacrifice. There has been capital punishment. So it's not to say that homosexuality doesn't deserve death. Every single homosexual will die. They're all mortal. Every one of them will die. And when they die, none of them will be able to say, I didn't deserve this.
Mm-hmm.
And neither can I. I'm going to die. And when I die, I won't be able to say, I didn't deserve this. All of us are going to get what we deserve. We're all going to die. Now, in the actual, this is back to Christmas, in the actual public square, in the judiciary, there was a capital punishment. there was an execution of an innocent victim who took the blame. So there has been a physical capital punishment. And you have to realize that the reason why nobody wants to get back to Mosaic law is because of the cross.
Yeah.
Like it's because of that crucifixion. So if you go back in time and he's told Moses, hey, you don't need to stone this guy because he's been executed in Christ. Like in the future, he's been executed in Christ. It's like, well, that's a tough jump right there. Right there, Moses is obeying the law he's been given. And he's obeying the law, and obedience is good and righteous. So can you go back there to that time and that moment in history and say amen? Can you pick up the rocks? Like, can you pick up the rocks to stone somebody who picked up sticks on the Sabbath? Can you, knowing what's coming, would you go be a revolutionary there? Or would you actually say, for this time, this is actually the law. This is actually holiness.
Yeah.
That it's not fake holiness because I have virtue from the future and I'm going to come back and judge it. It is crude, primitive. It's going to mature and it's going to be fulfilled in the cross. That's going to happen over thousands of years. But back then, can you actually say amen? And what you'll realize is when people when they just can't, they couldn't possibly imagine supporting David dinging the babes on the Craggies. They couldn't imagine genocide of the Amalekites. They can't imagine something like that being good being good there. Then they're showing that their loyalties and their affections are to their times, not to God.
Yeah.
Like to the scruples of their times.
Yeah.
So no, we shouldn't do that. We shouldn't do that. It's very different than David shouldn't do that, or David shouldn't have done that, or Moses shouldn't have done that. And we do need to try to find those things that do apply to us now that actually bind us as well. But you can reveal people's virtue loyalties really, really quickly with a time machine, a little bit of storytelling. So, I happen to hold to one interpretation of the New Testament and all Paul's epistles, and I believe they're binding in my life, and this is instruction I should be obeying. And a friend of mine could be like, nope, that's just for the first century, the second century. And my question is always, where's the line? When did it stop? Like, when did that line stop? And if we went and stood there and you heard Paul teaching this to women, would you say, yep, amen, that's the right medicine for the moment?
Or would you be hemming and hawing?
Yeah, would you be hemming and hawing exactly the same way? And all it does is reveal what I've said before when we talked about the nature of proof and so on, is that we assume our positions, we take our positions via affection, and then we defend them with logic. We don't find our positions with logic. It's affection first and then logic afterward. So as we read the Advent story, as we try to tell the story honestly to our kids, all of these stories, don't sentimentalize any of them.
And that's tricky because you just said you want your kids to be affectionate, have affection for the characters in the Bible.
Yep.
But don't
true sympathy.
Don't do that by making them fake children's Bible level.
Yeah. So don't coat them in cream cheese frosting.
Yeah.
Don't try to make it all sugary sweet.
It's not sentimental for the Noah's Ark story. It's actual affection.
Right? Yeah.
So
sentimentality tends to show up more extremely in the Christmas story than anywhere else because it's a baby.
It's away in the manger.
Yeah,
right?
There we go. And because that sentimentality shows up there, it's it's hard to see the real story.
That's why, kicking back to the video, the audio, the one that you did at the beginning, you went out of your way to try to highlight some of the gross parts of the Christmas story.
So
animal feces.
Yeah, you're in a stable.
Yeah.
We all know that.
Or afterbirth, right?
And this is the least hygienic place you could be doing this. It's the most unclean. And Christ is this cleaning agent. And so one of the big changes that we see from the Old to the New Testaments is that in the Old Testament, lepers are sent outside. Any bit of yeast makes the whole house unclean. We have to get it out, during Passover. It's got to be all the way out.
Yeah.
None of that. And then in the New Testament, we're told to be the yeast. There's this flip where it's okay, so now you are the pollutant. Like you are the thing, and you go pollute the world with light. You go, and that begins at Christmas. The invasion of light, and the invasion of light into unclean places. Then it begins in an unclean place, in an unclean moment. Immediately on the heels, there's genocide. Like there's immediate genocide on the heels of this birth, because the wise men can't keep their mouths shut. Not so wise, in my opinion. It's really funny. They're classic, like, well, I mean, astrologers, you know them. They're like these beautiful mind guys who've read the stars, and they show up to the king and like, hey, where's the new king? Like,
basic human. Everyone knows you don't ask.
They basically have no social skills.
Yeah.
Like the Magi have no social skills, but boy, could they read the heavens. It's which I think is pretty fantastic. Those are real characters that we can envision.
I mean, the one that showed up with the funeral stuff, to the baby gift, act of faith, but also.
Yeah. It's like, whew.
Save the myrrh till later.
Yeah. Like, okay. I brought my embalming kit.
Yeah.
It's like, oh,
for when
boy.
he dies.
Because it's here. Yeah. Later.
Yeah.
So you have this genocide, you have Rachel weeping, you've got the slaughter of all these babies, like you have massive uncleanness and darkness.
Incidentally, your dad's song, Let All the Stars in the Skies Give Praise, such a good Christmas song.
It's such a good one.
Yeah.
Because it does include, the whole context of this dark oppression that light entered. And so you have the light enters a stable, not because it's cutesy. It's not cute.
Yeah.
It's like there would have been cute moments, but the cute moments would have been wild incongruities. Mm-hmm. Like they would have been, wildly incongruous for the surroundings, for the setting, for the risk, for everything else that was happening. You have a nation that has been conquered, that is under a satanic empire, under the rule of a satanic empire. You've got this little regional king who's, just an absolute piece of work. Mm-hmm. Like you're going to end, like this is all going to go to a beheading of John the Baptist, a crucifixion, like there's genocide in the middle, there's exile, there's all these different like gnarly aspects to the story as the light begins to invade, as the yeast enters, and the yeast begins the subversion and the reversal of the way holiness and cleanness works. In the old covenant, it was always the holy clean thing was so fragile. There's so much fragility. Anything could make it unclean. You touch a dead person, it's unclean.
Spit.
You touch a leper,
Spit makes it unclean. Yeah.
It's like you're unclean. You're on your period, you're unclean. It's just you're unclean. And then there's the woman who's never stopped bleeding, touches Christ and is made clean. Everything flips. So nothing that touches him makes him unclean. It always goes the other direction. It breaks the other direction. Starts Christmas Day, and from then on, he can touch corpses. He's touching lepers. And it begins to invade out. So now all of our sins really are infected. Like our natures are infected with light, infected the other direction. And it's all pushing and pushing and pushing. Yeah. And so then it's super easy for us, having been affected by that light and also by the falsehoods of our own era, to look back at the Old Testament in some kind of judgy way.
Yeah.
Which is just stupid.
Yeah. Instead, look for how God's moving and positioning and getting the stage ready for the light.
Yeah. It's kind of like, my grandfather on my dad's side spent some time living in a chicken coop in Nebraska. That's how poor they were. Like the family was in a chicken coop. That was the only shelter they could find.
Wow.
And it's kind of like me looking back on that and saying, you're so poor, so stupid. It's like, oh, and I've been given more. Like I've been given more and I'm downstream. I'm going to look back at them and mock them or criticize them for living in a chicken coop. That's, gross. Come on, guys.
Yeah.
Sure. You could have done better than that.
Yeah.
That's just nonsense.
Reminds me of, that's too random.
Too random. Do it, Brian. I'm going to actually have to leave. Do it quickly.
We got time. No. Next time. We'll save it for next time.
Okay.
We got a call too. That's a great Christmas.
I'm 3 minutes
intro.
late for a meeting.
Well, that's the end.
The end. Bye.
Hi, it's Brian Cole here, wanting to let you know how you can support the Stories Are Soul Food podcast. You can do that by checking out Canon Plus. Head over to mycanonplus.com. Thanks for taking the time to listen to the SASF podcast. We'll hopefully be seeing you at mycanonplus.com.